Found footage fans, we need to have a conversation. Oh yes, we need to have a conversation indeed about what you want from a found footage movie. Put a pin in that, we're going to come on to that. We are talking about the 2012 Australian found footage movie, Muirhouse. And this is a movie about a supernatural investigator, a ghost hunter called Phillip Muirhouse. And he is somewhat of a renowned ghost hunter, and he is doing his latest book, which is accompanied by a DVD, and he's investigating this particular kind of haunted homestead called Monte Cristo, which has had a history of, you know, dark supernatural happenings. Now, in the beginning of the movie, we see those kind of faux documentaries, interviews, and things like this, and one of the kind of the key elements in this ghost hunting is never do it alone. Now, due to a scheduling issue, Phillip is actually left alone at this particular kind of haunted homestead on his own for a short time, couple of hours. And we see the footage, you know, that is happening within these hours. And of course, as you'd probably expect, the supernatural is there to keep him company, so to speak. So what will happen? You'll have to watch this movie and find out. So, let's talk about that initial question. What do you want from a found footage film? Now, I saw a quote from a review that I thought was very kind of captured what I think the plus points and then maybe the negatives are with this movie. And I am paraphrasing, but essentially it says, this movie sacrifices entertainment for realism. So, how does that sound to you? Would you rather have a like a Grave Encounters where we see kind of lots of overt imagery, wham bam, thank you ma'am, exciting, lots of kind of stuff happening on screen, or do you prefer a more realistic approach? Now, I would liken this in a way to the Blair Witch Project, the grandfather of found footage movies, because let's be honest, that original movie, not a lot happened on screen on that one, but people were genuinely kind of frightened of it. I will say the Blair Witch Project had a bit more kind of forward momentum in its narrative than this one does. But nonetheless, I think it goes to that kind of same vibe. That isn't to say that this movie doesn't have some creepy moments, though. Now, so let's talk about what I think works in this movie. And that is the big one, is it is more realistic than a lot of found footage movies because the premise is this guy on his own, and you know, we don't have any like big VFX moments. There's maybe one VFX shot in the movie. But what we do get is a genuine kind of building of creepy atmosphere with this guy walking around this house, getting freaked out by noises, doors slamming, strange voices. And, you know, it really helps that you have a guy on his own. So you have that feeling of isolation, you know. He's not in the group. There's not, you know, protection by numbers. I would recommend you watch this movie on your own, in actual fact, because it really does make you, you know, I watched it on my own, and I kind of you can understand the kind of the fear of being on your own, coupled with this kind of supernatural environment and things. So I thought that added to a good atmosphere. And then one big issue I have with a lot of horror movies, and the vast majority I would say, is I always, and I've mentioned it in a few reviews, is depictions of fear. When a character experiences something clearly supernatural, how they act like, you know, characters rather than real people. This guy, you know, and maybe he even overreacts to a certain degree, but, you know, he's an experienced ghost hunter of 10 years, we're told. But, you know, he's in this house on his own, and, you know, he's hearing something kind of crash or a voice or something, and he absolutely drops wolf bait and runs. And, you know, hats off, because that's what the vast majority of people would do, is they would absolutely shit bricks and just leg it. And I really appreciated this guy, the realistic portrayal of someone that he runs outside and he kind of calms down and kind of tries to go back in again a couple of times. So, you know, I thought it was a very kind of like real world scenario. And because this movie isn't sort of overt in its kind of imagery in regards to kind of the horror aspects and stuff. You know, if you've ever seen those kind of ghost hunter TV shows, Most Haunted and things like this, it's almost like one of those, but what if someone was just on their own and how kind of freaked out they would be? It's kind of what it feels like. But you know, because this is a film, that there's going to be something will happen ultimately. So I have to say, I thought it does strike you as realistic. Now, when we're kind of going around this house, he goes in the same rooms multiple times, kind of checking things, and we do see kind of mild sort of supernatural occurrences. He'll go out of one room and the furniture will be in a particular position. He'll go back in a little while later and then it will moved. Lights will go off. As I said, there's not anything gratuitous you'll see on the screen. In fact, practically nothing. But there is, you know, subtle elements that are kind of there. But I think it still is somewhat of a creepy vibe, if that makes sense. And the guy who you know plays Phillip Muirhouse, I think he actually is played pretty realistically in regards to how real people would react. I mean, bear in mind, this guy's meant to be doing a supernatural documentary, so he feels kind of compelled once he's kind of calmed down a bit to kind of go back in and try and find out what's happening. But I actually kind of quite like the fact, for example, there's a scene where, you know, in one instance the chairs are kind of tucked in under a table, the lights go out and then they're on top of the table and things, and he's sort of like checking around the chair to see if there's any kind of like wires attached to it or anything like that. So I kind of quite liked it. You know, I thought that was quite well done. So, you know, in my opinion, this is the movie that these filmmakers wanted to make. You know, it isn't going to be for everyone because it is not a high impact movie, you know. But I do feel it's clearly obviously very low budget, but I do feel that this movie has accomplished what it tried to do, if that makes sense. Now, that's not to say it's going to be for everyone, and we're going to come on to some of the kind of, you know, the flip side of the coin in just a moment. But, you know, I would say for the film that it's trying to be, it does succeed. But let's talk about that other, you know, flip side of the coin. So, one of the things this movie, I think, let's go with the obvious. I mean, you see nothing in this movie, practically. Nothing. So, you know, fans who are of the found footage genre, who expect to see creatures, ghosts, aliens, monsters on screen, even for a short time, which is what you tend to be in found footage movie, you won't get that in this film. You know, as I said, there's one VFX shot, and I don't want to talk about it because I don't want to spoil the one VFX shot they have. But it's not going to be for everyone. Now, what I think this movie could have done was have a little bit more in the narrative. Because, I mean, 2/3 of this movie is this guy just wandering around this house. If you compare it to, say, Blair Witch, there was forward momentum with that movie because they were going and searching and, you know, going to different kind of locations, and it doesn't happen in this one. So I think there could have been more to an actual story element here because, you know, ultimately there isn't a lot happens. I mean, it is just that kind of that one location ultimately. So I think the writing could have had a little bit more him to do, or something along the lines of that. You know, something to have a B storyline, or something. You know, it needed a little bit more meat on the bones because there just isn't that much there to begin with. There are a couple of instances where I feel it just kind of came out of the realistic depiction a little bit. There's one instance, for example, where the lights go completely out and we see, like, from a static camera that's got night vision, that he's meant to be kind of like feeling around and trying to kind of feeling around himself in the dark. But we know he's got a mobile phone, so why isn't he using that for light? You know, it's just like, that doesn't really kind of make sense. But, you know, but so there are a couple of instances where I feel it sort of breaks the illusion. And it has like an example of what I thought was going to be like a Chekhov's gun, if you know what that is. Essentially, we have this big sort of explainer at the kind of the beginning of the movie about all this kind of ghost hunting equipment. It spends a lot of time talking about electronic voice phenomenon. So I thought, well, that's clearly going to play a part in the movie. No, not really. And I thought, why do we spend so much time talking about that? Because it really doesn't have any relevance on the movie. In the Chekhov's gun, if you show a gun in the first act, it's got to be used by the third act. So we have this, you know, EVP kind of equipment that's never mentioned really again. So it's like, well, why was that even bothered in there? So, you know, it has a few issues like that. But I think possibly if you're not into this type of realistic sort of movie idea, you might find it boring, to be honest. So it's not going to be for everyone. And it's a fair comment. I mean, it's not to say that this is the way forward. There could have been more to this, I think. I think maybe it could have had... I mean, there's, for example, a sequence where he's outside, where one of the time he kind of runs outside, and he is actually on the phone to one of his colleagues, and we see the house behind him with the lights on. I mean, it could have been that they could have just had like a shadow in the window or something like that. You know, there's a few missed opportunities. So I'll give it a 5 out of 10. It's one of these Marmite movies, I feel. So I'm going right down the middle here. Because I think if you're interested in having maybe a different style of found footage movie, you might appreciate what it is trying to do. But if you don't have the patience and don't understand what they're trying to do with it, I feel you might find this dull. So it's a 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I look forward to seeing you next time.